Hello and welcome back to the Oh My Gosh, You're Glowing podcast. My name is Lindsay Walker, and today we are back with another epic guest episode. Today, I am super excited to be joined by Carly Schade. She is a holistic health and life coach where holistic health meets life coaching because let me tell you, we have had some serious conversations already on her podcast behind the scenes, and we have figured out that we have some pretty similar views on health, on life. And this woman has really experienced her own glow up, her own journey on her own, in her own way, but just in this way that is really, I'm excited for her to just show you her path and explain like what has really gotten her to this point. Because if you are someone that is this really ambitious woman that is at this point of true burnout, Carly is your woman, is your guide to get you to the other side. And I would love just for you all to hear Carly and her message today. So, Carly, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be back. Like you said, our conversations are always one of my favorites.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we got connected and we did get connected from a mastermind that both of us are in. And it just kind of was conversation after conversation, very casually, that all of a sudden, I think the two of us realized, hey, I think we have some really similar views on health, on life. And so it's been really great to have these conversations. Most of them have been recorded, honestly, on each of our podcasts now. But I think it's really great to have these conversations with people that have similar viewpoints to you, but also you've had your own journey. Like, yes, we probably see health and life very similarly, but the way that we have gotten to each of our points in our journey has been very different, which I think is so special because, you're attracting the people that are attracted to your energy and your journey. And then myself is the same, which I love, just having these unique, beautiful codes and activations. But also, the two of us can really riff on some similar topics, which we'll be able to do today. And you are actually back from this 5-week European vacation, which before we started recording, you just mentioned, you were like, I think I just took myself through my own course, my own program, and now I've graduated. So I would actually love to start with that because it is like these travel and these adventures that really teach us and show us our own methods, our own techniques, and how we guide and lead other people through what we're really teaching. So, first off, with your recent European vacation and you mentioning that you feel like you've graduated from your own program, why do you really feel like that? And what was the biggest lesson that you feel like you have learned from that journey?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yes, let's chat about Europe. So, just a quick synopsis. Total did so many different things on this Europe trip. Started with a camper van trip in Scotland, wedding in London, roamed around Paris, went to the French Open with my fiance, and then the last 2 weeks I visited friends in southern France and then the Azores Islands off of Portugal. So every week felt like a month in itself. It was wild.
I bet.
Yeah. So why I say I graduated from my own program is when we talk about I combine that holistic health with life coaching because like we've talked about, right? The supplements, the workout routine, the really good diet, right? I used to be a dietitian. Like that matters and that's important. But if you are not pursuing something that lights you up, if you aren't setting boundaries with yourself in a workplace, in a relationship, you're gonna get the energy sucked out of you. And so we need both and vice versa. If you're like chasing your dream job, but you don't come up for air, you don't allow yourself check ins, like you're not setting those boundaries and you're doing it at the cost of your health, you're going to turn to burnout. And I've done both of those. So now we combine both. And
Love it.
with Europe, and so I realized one of these kind of parts of my method is exploration and embodiment of what we're teaching. And one of the biggest things that I teach is this sense of time, right? That like time comes from within us. And burnout can happen when we're constantly feeling rushed. We're constantly comparing ourselves against the clock, right? Or when I left my 9 to 5 job, I did that so that I could pursue freedom, right? So that I could, move on my own time. But I was really still stuck in this nervous system pattern of 9 to 5. Like I could not get out of it for a year and a half. I tried. I was like, I need to slow down. I need to do this. I need to do this. But I was so still stuck. My cells were stuck in this pattern of feeling rushed. Everything was urgent. Everything was on fire. And so when I finally went to Europe, I removed myself finally from this environment that had quote unquote been making me sick. And so in Europe, I got to like totally disrupt my pattern of time where, we ate dinner at midnight and we slept until 11 and like totally did the European thing. And I got to stay with two of my friends. So we really got to dive into the European way. But it
Yeah.
was like I got to disrupt this pattern and there was nothing that I needed to do. And in that pattern disruption and in just being present, that's why I felt like I was there for 5 months when I was there for 5 weeks. So I kind of like
Mhm.
unlocked this code of time, presence, and focus gives you your time back.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing. And I think you're right. The disruption of your, you saw it as more of like the 9 to 5, but it's really like what you're describing is your way of being, like the traditional, what you said, you were kind of locked in, like your cells were locked into this certain way. For you, it was this 9 to 5 thinking. Now, for sure, leaning into the European way of living is definitely going to break you out of it, which you did truly lean into, because I think people can also go to Europe and not maybe lean into that way of living or that way of being and break themselves out of that. But the fact that you did really gave you those codes and that message to bring back. Now, I'm sure people are listening and they're like, that's amazing. I would love to go to Europe and experience that as well. But from what you learned and what you experienced on your European adventure, what could you really tell people to do in their day-to-day lives to still break out of that pattern if they're really resonating with this story, but they're like, I'm not entirely sure I'm going to be able to go to Europe right now.
Fair question, right? And it's not necessary, and it's not about the 9 to 5 per se either. Really, it's one of the things was our relationship with ourself and time. So those two kind of pieces of advice that I would give. So the first one is going to be nature. Because also, yes, I was in Europe, but I laughed because those last 2 weeks when I visited my friends, I I didn't see a single monument. I didn't go like there was none of that. We woke up and I purposely went to go visit these two friends because I wanted connection, right? I wanted to go reconnect with people who I knew were living life a little bit differently, right? I knew they were one of them I met from Ohio, one of them I met from both in the States. Like they had made these leaps to go choose to live life a little bit differently. And so I just wanted to go connect with people where I knew we could talk about kind of similar things in life. We've both gone through, like you and I, different journeys, but there's a similar connection.
Mm-hmm.
So connection was the thing. And then also nature. Like, again, I didn't go like try to do everything. I did less but better, which is absolutely something that we teach, especially for those high achieving, ambitious women. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the thing that lit me up, the thing that really kind of healed me was I realized I can't do it all. And just waking up and having a good conversation and a cup of coffee and a walk to the ocean, that is actually how I graduated, right? That's how I embodied everything. And that's how I was able to kind of finally phase out these cells, the patterns that my cells were holding on to. So that's one, right? Is just connection and nature and doing less. I know that's three in one, but it's kind
We
of
can take it. There's
part
like
number
shampoo
one.
that's 2 in 1, so you can have
Yeah.
your three in
Yeah.
one.
But like right, the simple things, the connection, the nature, and a little bit less in your schedule. And then the second one is time. And I know that, yes, there are meetings that we have to get to and, kids that we have to pick up or whatever it is. Our life revolves around that. But I think just checking in with yourself of like, where can you check the clock less? Because time, right? If you are someone who's in burnout, you never feel like there's enough time and you've somehow established this sense of urgency. So, the problem is not time. We have all the time in the world. We create time. Time is a feeling, right? Why is it that I felt like I was there for 5 months? So it's the clock and it's this comparison and we're constantly checking the clock and we look at our phones every 6 minutes and oh, it's 6 o'clock. I'm supposed to eat dinner instead of like, oh wait, I actually just feel like I want to go for a walk right now. Like we just it's a lot easier to let the clock dictate our lives instead of our feelings dictate our lives.
Mhm.
So, yes, certain things that you have to show up for, you have to be there, but where can you check the clock less and just stop worrying about what time it is and what time you should be doing something and just kind of allow yourself to move through the day?
Yeah, that right there about not checking the clock as often is actually gold because I would also invite anyone listening who is maybe like what are the days where you feel like you have a ton of time and what are the days where you feel like you have no time? Because I know for me, and I've realized this recently too, so I'm glad you're bringing it up. When I'm literally checking the clock every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it does actually feel like I have less time and it feels like I actually do less that day versus if there's not necessarily a plan, but I am doing things that I love in the day and I'm just kind of moving from one thing to the next and I'm not really paying attention to the clock. To your point, there are certain meetings that we have to get to and you can put that in there as you need to. But as I'm just kind of moving throughout the day and doing the things that I love, even if they are scheduled things at a certain time, I actually feel like I've done so much more in a day than just staring at the clock, staring at the clock. And there was actually I've played with because I will say I'm notoriously someone who is late places. And I actually have noticed that if I'm checking the clock every 10 seconds, I'm more likely to be late to an appointment versus if I'm like, okay, I know I need a certain amount of time to get ready, and that's great, but I'm not actually checking the clock. I'm just kind of like going through what I need to do to get done to be able to leave. I'm more likely to be on time because I haven't looked at the clock every 10 seconds. So I think that's just super interesting. And I bet you were on this giant European vacation. So it was this finite time of these 5 weeks that you said felt like 5 months. But how many times are we on vacation, even if it's just for a weekend, and we feel like we've done all of these things. It's been so full. And then we come back and our days just like blink by in a second. And so I think that's amazing to have that realization and that code really unlocked about time. I've heard so much being talked about time and how time is just like a construct of our imagination and all of these things. But it can be really challenging to break away from that. So the fact that you really brought that up and brought it to people's awareness and attention, I think is really key because not many people even realize that that is something that they can think about differently. Especially when you said, oh, it's 6 o'clock, it kind of like triggers something is triggered in your mind of like, what do you normally do at this specific hour? So just having that realization of like, where can you kind of like, do something different? And
Hmm.
especially about your message about connection. You know, I don't know exactly why you joined the mastermind specifically, but I know like one of the reasons I did was to get into a space of people, like you said, who think differently, who are living the life that you want. And you're talking about like your cells changing and you getting out of this pattern, being around people who are living the life that you want, doing something differently, like that's going to help shift your body and your cells as well. So the fact that you had that realization, and this is another reminder to listeners too of, if you're feeling in that burnout or you're feeling like you're not loving the life that you're living, like how can you change your environment? And that starts with people.
People, oh my gosh, the people you surround yourself with matter so much. And you're right. I think we join the mastermind for different reasons, but part of that, right, the beauty of it is it's this beautiful evidence of what is possible. And I actually had a very whatever, hilarious sibling conversation with my brother yesterday. Right, we're still kind of
Yeah.
seeing differently in these lives, and he's like, normal people, like you said, normal people can't just quit their jobs. They can't just whatever. There's this fairy tale
Mhm.
world.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, that's where you and I are different because I think, and for all the listeners, like, yes, it does. You don't have to just uproot your life and quit your job. But the reality is, there are a lot of people living their lives in a very different way, right? I was an international
Mhm.
guide in Southeast Asia for 8 years. I know that there's a lot of people living their lives very different ways. And so that is why I combine health with life coaching because it's like if you are not happy, there is another way. And it doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily have to be super aggressive. But to your point, maybe it's just like, I'm going to join a volleyball league because I want to spend more time outside and I want to meet new people. I want to connect. And all of a sudden, you've met somebody else that you didn't, that wasn't in your orbit. That's like, oh yeah, like I, have this dream job and I get 5 weeks vacation, right? And you realize like, oh, I kept myself stuck and small because I thought there was no other way. And that is why people is the next best step to changing your circumstances for sure.
I think that's such an easy way to start to shift too, because, when we start to talk about changing your career or changing even how you make money, all of these other things feel so much bigger. But if you really think about the circle of people that you hang out with every day, every week, the people that are really in your environment, in your orbit, it can be so out of someone's comfort zone to go to a new type of event. Like you said, even like joining a volleyball league, that can be so simple. Going to a new place where you're going to meet different people, that's such a simple way to begin to shift your world, shift your life, and put your energy in the energy of other people who think differently. But at the same time, I see so many people are super resistant to that because it's so out of people's comfort zones. And if if anyone has heard a lot of what I've been doing for the past few years, it's just going to a ton of in-person events because it's literally bumping up your energetic field with these other people. But I think you said it super simply as well. It could be just what is in your area, who are the types of people that you want to be around that can help you shift so easily, because you never know which person, even it could be at the coffee shop. And something that I've been really leaning into is like, if I have this thought to go to a certain coffee shop or a grocery store or something, or my energy is pulling me somewhere and I don't know why, I just go. Because what if you're meant to bump into someone that day? Or what if you're meant to meet someone and maybe it doesn't feel like the biggest thing of the day or of your life, but there's this one moment that your soul or that your higher self was really trying to guide you towards. And it's that interaction with another person. I think we really underestimate the interactions with other people of how much they could shift your life.
Absolutely. And I like what you said too. Sometimes it can be one moment or it looks like one moment,
Mm,
but especially for me, it's like it was a this transformation of just again, it was like burned out. I was blaming everyone for my circumstances. I wasn't happy in my relationship, like all of these things, right? And I was trying to change everything and everyone around me instead of realizing that I needed to change. And but it wasn't just this big like aha massive thing. It was little things over time that compounded. And so yes, that's if you're not ready to quit your job but you're like I'm ready for something new, there's actually a psychology behind it too of like if you want to get your finances, like you said, finances in order or something like that, these really big things, but you're like, that's too big. It's too big of a frog to swallow. Start with something small, clean out a junk drawer, right? Or like go get a
mhm.
workout in, like do something, go accomplish something that makes you successful, right? It's like, oh, I did accomplish this. It kind of gives you a little confidence to start
Mhm.
to slowly move into something else. And so I think a lot of people on podcasts, on social media, we see the big break, right? We see the
Yeah.
big thing, but we don't realize how many little things compounded over time behind the scenes. And that prevents a lot of people, like you said, from jumping because they think it needs to be like I'm going to jump off a 40-foot cliff. And it's like, well, let's just get outside first, you know? Like we
Yeah.
can start small and those things do add up over time.
Yeah, those are all really, really great reminders. And I love that you're bringing such a tangible, actionable steps to allowing people to really shift their life into a healthier life, more aligned life, like whatever it is for people that they're really looking for. Because, like, to your point, it does oftentimes look like these people who are massively successful and have already like gotten the dream job or the dream life, they've really created that. Like you're saying, it's not very often that we see the entirety of their journey. And certainly people are sharing more vulnerably, but at the same time, they're not maybe going to share every single aspect of their journey, and it's going to look differently. I think that's really why it's so great to start connecting with people who are at or what you're wanting to create. So if you are someone that wants to become an entrepreneur, for example, like find other people who are in your space so that you can actually see the behind the scenes of, hey, what are you actually working on? What are you actually dealing with, to kind of like ground in and like bring the levity back to the process and the journey that's happening. But again, to your point, it's these small actionable steps that is going to shift. And even from an energetic perspective, when you mentioned like cleaning out a junk drawer, I love things like that, because if you've ever cleaned your house, how much energy, right? How much energy that shifts, and you just like feel so much better. And you're like, I am a whole new person. I am brand new. And all I did was clean the bathroom. That can shift so much. And we forget about these tiny little things that we can do in our life that make a massive difference because we've just cleansed the energy that's been sitting there for who knows how long. So I think those are just incredible reminders to give to people. And I know that you've mentioned burnout quite often, and that's something that you're really passionate about helping people heal and move out of. And so, what was it for you? You kind of hinted at a few times about maybe what that looked like, but what was it for you that really allowed you to realize you were in burnout? And also, why did you want to start to help people with this? Like, what was the breaking point for you that shifted everything?
So, okay, take it back to 2016 is when I basically like had landed my dream job. I had walked away from the nutrition. I was a dietitian and I saw the very limited, constricted world of like conventional healthcare. And so I had an opportunity to go travel to Southeast Asia to be an international guide, tiny little village in Supchem in Laos, like 350 people. It's incredible. And I had worked at this organization for 8 years and it was my dream job. I loved this thing. I grew up with it. I was young. I was like learning and exploring and all of that. I was guiding trips. I was getting to see like what happens, talk about disrupting your patterns. I was getting to see what happens. Like these college age kids, it was kind of 2 week trips basically. And it was like, oh, like they disrupted a pattern. They got out of their comfort zone. Like just how much growth comes from exploration and putting yourself in these new areas, like a little bit of that adventure mindset. So it was my dream job. And then COVID happened. And it's a very small company. We were like all best friends, and the job changed. And I kind of started to move into this admin role. And I just stayed, and we had to rebuild from the ground up, and we canceled, thousands of people's trips and all these things. And so it was one of those things where this environment changed, but I still cared about it. I was still passionate. So I was like, okay, I'm going to stay. I'm going to stay. I'm going to stick it out. And over time, what happened was that I stayed too long and the job changed and it was no longer right for me. It was not what was good for me. But I was so afraid of the change. So I was like, instead of leaving, I could not fathom leaving. So I was like, okay, well, I'm experiencing this dissonance. So now I have to change myself to fit into this environment. It was like the environment changed. And so I had, two options: I leave or I change. And I was not ready to leave. It was too scary. It was too big. And for years, I just shifted. I told myself I was meant to be behind a computer. I was just going to like type away. I was this tech operational person. And I was okay at it. Maybe that was my zone of competence.
Mhm.
But over time, I kept being like, okay, we have to change this. We have to change this. Like, let's get back to this. And I was the person that was constantly trying to push things. And eventually we'd push something and then nothing would change. Or they would try, right? I'd push something and then nothing would change. And it was because I was trying to change who the company was. Like that was the culture. That was the two business owners. They're very good friends. I love them. That's who they are, and that's how the company grew. And I was trying to change the company, and that wasn't really going to happen. And so I just noticed like I was growing bitter. Bitter was my sign. I'm also a projector human design. So we'll get into that. But I was so bitter at everybody around me. And I was just like, that's where I established that sense of urgency. Just everything was urgent. Everything was important. I didn't find fulfillment in my life, and I was trying really hard to do it, but I just kept like coming up with blocks and blocks and blocks, and I was on a hamster wheel. Every year that went by, nothing changed. And so finally, I think my body just screamed so loud. There was just like, and it was leaking into every part of my life, right? It was like I was blaming my fiance. I was like, I want to have the best relationship ever. I want to have the best sex ever. I want to have all these things like, and I kept making him responsible for my happiness because work wasn't fulfilling me, right? And I started to realize this pattern that I'd fallen in with him, right? My relationship was a bit of a mirror. And so, yeah, I just like, I got to this point where I was making everyone else responsible for my happiness and for my fulfillment. And I saw And I just kind of I did have an aha moment where I was like, oh, this is, I'm the problem. This is on me, right? And actually I had taken a like Shoshana, our mentor, like I had taken just like one day of her course, and it took just one person to kind of call you out in like a tough love way that I got to see something different. And I was like, oh, this is time for me to leave. So yeah, like it was a bit of that build up. My body, again, my health had screamed so loud, but it really was blaming everybody else for my happiness and doing that for years and nothing had changed. So it was like, okay, it's time to try something else. And there's a little bit of radical responsibility here.
Wow. That's an incredible story. And also, just kudos to you for really hearing your body and like what it was saying, because you said it screamed louder and louder, and it's usually what happens when it's saying, hey, you're out of alignment. And for you to really recognize that you know you were trying to change something outside of you. And you're not the only one that's always, not always, but trying to change your external circumstances or other people or your environment, because you're like, oh well, if they change, then I'll be happier. And it's this real realization of like what you said, like, oh, I'm the problem, but it's not I'm the problem. It's just like this isn't resonant anymore. This isn't in alignment. And that's a great reminder as well when people are also projecting onto you, when roles are reversed, when you feel, because I'm sure the people at that company, whether they told you or not, could feel in a way like you trying to shift them. And it's like when people are not enjoying or not liking or not agreeing with you and what you're doing, which you kind of alluded to the fact that maybe that's a little bit of what's going on in your life right now, is that it's not about you. Like when you think about how you were doing that to the company and you doing that in this scenario, it was like, oh, it was all on me because I was not happy with my life and what was going on internally. And so when that projection gets spun around on you from other people, we have to also remind ourselves like it's actually not about us. It doesn't mean that we need to change, even though they're trying to change us. It's just that like you're reflecting a mirror to them that they don't like. And I think that's an it was probably a challenging experience to have, but also a great reminder when the opposite happens to you, you can come back to yourself to say, okay, I remember what I was doing to them and that wasn't great. So this is the same thing happening, and not make yourself wrong for other people's projections.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that has been a beautiful thing about growth, right? Of like, even a year ago, 6 months ago, how different I would have reacted from other people's, what are you
Mm,
doing? Come back down here. Wait, I don't understand what you're doing. And how much, how much more I love it actually now when when someone doesn't understand me, or I've
mhm,
learned like, oh, not everything is meant for everyone to understand.
mhm.
And old me, again, I didn't feel so safe in my body. I didn't have that rooted foundation. And so I wanted everything to make sense to everyone. And I think that is why I work with such ambitious, high achieving women, because that was actually a key thing that kept me in that burnout too, was this, I had my blinders on and all I cared about was achieving. Right. And I had grown in this company and it was great. I ended up running the entire program in Southeast Asia and all of those things. But then the job changed. And so all I was like, well, all I care about is achieving. So I'm going to just keep trying to achieve, 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 achieve. And I never looked around and being like, wait, is this actually what I want to achieve? And that's where I was like, I'm going to be the best damn operations manager they've ever seen. And it was like, wait, what? Like that's all of a sudden it was like, that's not who you want to be. You are a creative person who is meant to lead from the front and wants to work with people and about health. And so that's the other thing that I warn people of, like, why I start with this rooted health method and being grounded, because again, it's more important to know who you are than what you want. And for a long time, I thought I wanted this thing. But when we are these high achieving women, we get so obsessed with achievement that we forget about who we are and the point of it all. And that's where that root aspect comes in.
That's beautiful, of knowing who you are instead of going after. It's almost like I am envisioning like people going after this carrot where you're saying you're like, I'm gonna be the best at what I am at this job. And then you realize, like, I think we're taught to be the best at whatever we're doing. And so it's kind of this, I'll feel whole and I'll feel worthy once I'm good at this thing that I actually hate. But a lot of us aren't even coming back to ourselves to realize, do I like this thing? So you to have that realization of, okay, I've been putting a lot of energy and effort into something that I don't even enjoy. And I'm sure that you were the best at that job. But it's like that's why there was such like disresonance. There was like such friction when you put more effort and effort and effort into it because your soul is like, this is not it. Maybe for someone else, this is it. And I think that's where we can get into this like this comparison between other people because you see someone, maybe if you were like to compare someone doing a similar job and saying, but they're loving it and they're doing great, like what's wrong with me? You are not the same as someone else. Now, maybe that's not for, you're not comparing yourself in an office job, but that could even be for entrepreneurship or whatever you're doing as a high achieving woman. Now, I would love to know because you said that you were a dietitian and you didn't love that type of work, but you're also very connected to the body and very connected to your health and you're bringing it into the way that you work with women now. So, what was it really the work that you did with clients as a dietitian or was it more about the embodiment that you had with your own health that has allowed you to bring this work into your current career, your current entrepreneurial efforts?
It has definitely unfolded over time. So the early days, right, where I went to grad school, finished, passed my boards, did all of that. The early days, so it's changed a little bit. Now you're required to get your master's, but there's a year of supervised practice where you need, it's like a residency, right? 1,200 hours. And every 3 to 6 weeks, you get a new job. You're at these all these places. And so I got a very wide range of experience from working at WIC clinics with, women and babies to the food service line at hospitals to a functional nutritionist who is a private practice. So I got all this experience working at the NICU at a VA hospital.
Wow.
Not a single person or experience lit me up. And not even a person. There were people where I met where a woman who worked at the VA hospital for 20 years still had 2 weeks of vacation. I got, one of the women I shadowed at the hospital where they basically, as the man told us that like we needed to dress better, but then he would put us on the front line of the hospital cafeteria every day to serve food. And so it was like, I was like, what are we doing? Right. Or when I was at the NICU, there's just this hierarchy of doctors and you were viewed as ancillary service and you weren't really valued in your opinion. And I was just like, I know I'm meant for more than this. And so it was both the environment. And then also when I did have clients, maybe 90% of them didn't know why they were there. Their doctor just told them to come in and I'd rather take a pill for this. Or they would just lie. They were like wildly overweight and they said they ate a bowl of mac and cheese a day. It's like, okay, well, how big is this bowl? So I realized one, kind of like, I actually call this my lobster moment where like you outgrow. So, and it's part of my method. And it was what I talked about with my old job. I realized like there is this massive environment that is draining me on a daily basis, the hospital, healthcare, conventional system. I don't have the energy to go change it. So I'm going to go change myself. And that was a positive spin on it though. Like I'm going to
Mm.
leave. I'm choosing to leave because my impact can be made elsewhere. I'm not going to go fight this system right now. Sometimes it is
Mhm.
better to just leave. And then two was the people I was working with. I have no desire to help people that don't want to help themselves. And some people think that sounds really awful. There's a lot of different people in the world, but I'm here to help you, like, your potential, and I'm here to help you get it, right? Like, and so these people who just wanted the simple fix, the quick pill, the bypass of the whole process, that's not what I teach, and that's not holistic, sustainable health or change for me. So it was a bit of both.
Yeah. I mean, you said that you only want to help people who want to help themselves. And certainly there are people out there who may have an opinion about that. But I agree because I have tried to help people that don't want to help themselves. And really, I'm just the one that ends up frustrated. And they're just sitting there waiting for me to slap a pillow on their desk to say, like, this is going to change your life and get rid of all your problems. And so I think there is also which the traditional medical system does not see it this way, but you either want to heal or you don't. And if your cells, if your DNA are not in a state to heal, you can do literally everything and it's not going to work. So for you to see that and say like, hey, if you're not, because look at how much energy and effort you are putting towards it as well and putting towards these people. And if they're not really, mirroring that energy back of, whatever it is, just to be reciprocating your work and your energy and your heart into them, healing is a combination of you receiving and you doing. It's not just the other person saying, okay, just sit there and stare at the TV and I'll heal you. Like that's not what it is. So for you to have that realization, like it can be, hard for you to realize, but I mean, I 100% agree with you as someone who's attempted to heal the people that do not want to heal. And for you to even realize, I've never been in that scenario of like in the medical system as far as like working in it, but to hear your reflection, your experience in it sounds just as challenging as I would imagine it to be. So,
It
um,
was.
getting yourself out, but then also utilizing. So that's what I would love to know. Like, was it the practices like, okay, so you're like, the environment is not it. I had to get myself out. I totally see you there. Was it those practices that you were like, okay, yeah, I still can use them on myself? Or was there other things that you just really experienced and embodied within yourself that turned into what you now teach?
Yes, I forgot there's that part two of the question. So yes, I got out. So really though, I've never left it. I mean, what started this path is my obsession with the body. I also used to think I wanted to be a professional chef from like ages 0 to 12. So
Nice.
like cooking was my first realization that I am a creative person.
Mhm.
So when I left grads or when I left after, the dietetic career, I have always done experiments on myself. So I've just now gotten to enjoy studying on my own, right? I'm not handed a textbook. I get to go seek out these books. So I think I told you before, like Mitochondriac Manifesto is all
Mm.
about the importance of light, water, and magnetism, right? Grounding, the importance of eating local. That's a whole nother story. And like the importance of our water. And so it has always been a part of me, my passion, my love. It's like science is my love language. And why what I incorporate into it too is into my method is especially for an ambitious, high achieving woman who really doesn't set boundaries, who thinks they can do it all. And I know you can. Science gave me permission that I couldn't give myself. So I've kept not necessarily just the nutrition, but the love of body and biochemistry and the love of science that is carried with me this whole time. And I do my own self research. I do experiments on myself. I went off hormonal birth control 5 years ago. I do a lot about cycle syncing. Like it was really hard for me to slow down when I first left that burnout job. Let me tell you, it does get worse before it gets better sometimes because your body is like, I have to be doing something and moving all the time. And so
Mhm.
when I learned about cycle syncing from a scientific standpoint, hormones, all these things are changing. You're supposed to feel more tired. You're supposed to relax. It gave me
Mhm.
the permission that I could never give myself. So it's not just nutrition. That was the spark of it. It gave me the foundation to learn about the science and body. But that's where it's really kind of gotten to develop in really whatever I'm interested in that year. Like 1 year, it's maybe cycle syncing, 1 year, it's nervous system regulation, 1 year, it's all about the importance of food and light. And that just kind of gets wrapped up into my teachings. And so yeah, that's I use science to maybe kind of help people like to believe science more than just something that's woo woo. And so I'm like, cool, I'm going to give it to you in a scientific way. And then you maybe can give yourself permission to try this new thing.
Yeah, that's a very embodied way to learn. And, the fact that you had this spark of the body and the nutrition, and you're kind of like, okay, that wasn't exactly what I was looking for, like the dietitian route, but you had enough of a background to go do your own research and do your own experimenting and the embodiment. And I love that you take yourself through what you are then eventually going to take your clients through, because I see a lot of it's not necessarily in the health coaching root cause spirituality space, but more so the traditional systems are more like, well, we were taught this, so I'm just going to tell you to do this. And there's that lack of embodiment. It's like, have you ever done that? Like if, you know, some male doctor told you to cycle sync or tried to explain that to you, it'd be like, have you ever done this? Do you even know what this feels like? Do you even know? Like, no, just this is like should not be happening. So that level of embodiment to know like how does it affect your body? Now, your body's not going to be everybody's, but and having that, I think that you're probably really attracting those people that really like that sciency basis to have that are maybe a little less likely to believe the quote unquote woo woo side because they want that foundation. And I think that's a beautiful way to bridge the science with the woo, with the energy that a lot of people are really desiring and really want. And you have that embodiment piece to really say, like, hey, I tried this and this is how I felt. And you're able to guide people in a much deeper way as well.
And it's certainly a bridge because we do need both, right? And this
Mhm.
last year, one of the biggest things that has changed my life was I had to let go of a lot of emotions and the pelvic floor, right? And this emotional release and the energy behind it. And I think it is both. And that's why I love what I do because I get to be a bridge to both because we aren't just talking about science. That might be, the foot in the door, but it goes so much further beyond that. And that's the shift too in my own life in this last year and a half. I've always been open to everything, very open-minded, but I've really felt it. So yeah, I think that's actually maybe what has really opened up my business is that for the longest time I was kind of just playing in the health world, right? The science thing that made sense to everybody else. But I've kind of walked myself through most of the scientific embodiment practices I teach.
Mhm.
And this year and a half, when I say Europe kind of helped me graduate from my own program, it was maybe the energetic program. And so I do include both of those in my teachings and my work because it's holistic. You can't have one without the other. And so I think maybe that's what Europe was. So thank you for that reflection is like the embodiment of my energetic practice, that kind of final piece.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what was it that got you to that energetic piece? Because it sounds like Europe was really this culmination, like you graduated from your own program, but you weren't introduced to the energetics right at the start of Europe. So, when were you introduced to this concept that you can actually bridge the science with the energetic? And what was the experience for you? You keep mentioning the past year, year and a half.
Well, so one thing, I mean, I've worked in travel in tiny, tiny remote villages for 8 years. So you are open, like travel is a huge part of my life. I've done ayahuasca in Peru. I worked in tiny village in Southeast Asia and Laos. Like I've always been open, right? Again, I have an open center, open brain. I've always been open to new experiences. But actually coming back full circle to the importance of the people that you surround yourself with, the last year and a half, so right before I decided to quit my job, one of my very, very good friends from high school came to live with me as a travel nurse for a couple months, and she was kind of going through her own journey, and she's always been very like inner feminine in her body. She really like we were opposites. Like she really knew her body. And I was really good at achieving and the finances, and I was very disconnected from my body. So it was this kind of beautiful divine intervention and she was living with me. And so she attended a women's circle, something in the neighborhood. And I was like, sure, I'll go. And it turned into like a 2 month women's channeling class. And I did it with her. And that first step was, again, it was like that gradual, it wasn't this big leap. It wasn't like all of my problems were solved and I became the most enlightened human in the world after these 2 months, but it was this step. It was a change. And I started to get more comfortable. And that's actually now the multidimensional energy healer that I go see once a month, like this. And so what it was a safe space with really intuitive, embodied women
Mm.
for me to lean into that side. And I had never been able to do that before. And so I surrounded myself with the right person, the right people, and I was able to create an environment that allowed me to soften into this other side that needed to be tended to. So that's what started it. I've always been open to it, but it kind of just snowballed. And then I became a little more comfortable, with our mentor, our mastermind, right? It was like, oh,
Mm.
this is another group that's going to provide another layer of healing to this side of me that I want to work on. So that is the beauty of just taking that one small step is you don't know where it's going to lead, but like with each step it peels back that layer. And now I'm able to talk about it so openly.
That's beautiful and so amazing that like you're saying, you never know when it's like that one event, that one person that just kind of like drops the seed. And you just mentioned so many different people. I love that you're bringing it back to like the people you surround yourself with because it was the one friend, that one event, the people that were there, and you just never know how connected each one is going to be. Like if you really take it back to that event, those people that were there. And I'm sure even as you were there that day, you didn't realize that would have such an impact in your life and how you see the world and what you've been open to since then. And kind of what you said earlier is you don't necessarily always see how important those people or those moments are at the time, but it's the reflection a year and a half, multiple years later that you're like, wow, if that didn't happen, if I didn't go to that thing, if I didn't listen to this person, if I didn't meet this person, where I'm at today in my life, it may be very different. And I think that's just like a beautiful full circle moment in our conversation. And I just love the importance of what you've really said about people in your environment and really how it shifts and changes. So, Carly, I just want to say thank you so much for being here with us today, for sharing all of your divine wisdom with our listeners today. I know that this conversation is really going to resonate with so many people for so many different reasons. And I'm super, super excited for them to hear it. Now, if there are people that are wanting to connect with you deeper, how can they find you? And also, do you have any parting words that you really want to share with the listeners?
Okay, let's start with if you are interested in working with me, learning more about what I do, definitely Instagram always. I love voice notes. I know everybody is like, don't be shy, but I'm like, seriously, just don't be shy. Like, send me a voice note. No texting, just a voice note. I want to hear your voice. So it's at Carly Schade, obviously all in the show notes. Instagram for sure. And then I do have a podcast, Coffee with Carly, where we do a lot of the bridging the gap between, the intuition and science and all of that. And we also have kind of a spinoff or a part of the podcast is a weekly newsletter called The Weekly Brew. So it's like your weekly wake up to a happier, healthier life. So the links for all that are on my Instagram. And then I do have something that we kind of touched on is the exploration piece. And so how we talked about like going to join a volleyball team or these kind of going to a women's channeling event. Like exploration is how we become the person that's ready for this next chapter. And so I did create, inspired by my Europe trip, a masterclass called Free to Roam. And it is all about like the art of exploration and just kind of how messy action can lead to who you're meant to be. So that will be coming out. It's free to join at the end of July. And then, of course, I have one-to-one mentorship spaces for someone who really wants that like high proximity. We're ready to make that change. And, and that's the first step. You was like the way that my friend was a women's channeling circle person for me. Like that is what I love about coaching is like, let me be that person for you who can show you all the different things I've walked myself through and you get to choose what works for you. Um, so yeah. And then some parting words of wisdom. Um, I would say that a favorite quote of mine from a retreat that I attended back in January, one of the speakers said, "You create who you are." And I love that because, again, I think we all talk about these massive leaps, these big changes. We're seeing this person that became an overnight success. We're seeing this person that got to transform their life, right? Like, my brother's like, you're living this fairy tale world. And it's like, well, it gets to be that way, but it doesn't just come from this massive leap. It's these everyday actions that you create who you are. So if you want to be someone that is different, how can you make one tiny shift in your day? Right? How can you choose to not check your phone every 6 minutes? How can I choose to put my phone on do not disturb when I'm working and allow myself to get in the flow state? How can I choose to go for that 30-minute non-negotiable walk every day without a phone, without AirPods in, and just be? And so it's these little tiny decisions every day that build over time, that compound to eventually create who you are. But you create who you are and you have full control over that.
Mm, so good. Thank you so much for that. And so digestible too, from an energetic and very tangible sense. I really love just everything that you shared with us today has been just so enlightening and so just full of deep embodied wisdom. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for joining me today to have this beautiful conversation. And for anyone listening, make sure to give us a rating wherever you listen to podcasts and send to a friend who you thought of when you were listening to this episode today. I will put all of Carly's links in the show notes, and I will see you in the next episode. So thank you all so much, and thank you, Carly.
Thanks so much, Lindsay.
Bye.